All right, everybody. Thanks for doing the Glass Horror Channel, the best horror channel here on YouTube. And today I am super, super excited. I have the Manson Brothers with me, Mike and Chris from the Manson Brothers Zombie Massacre. And how are you guys doing?
We're awesome. Chris
good.
is nice and warm in LA, and I'm freezing my butt off in Chicago.
It's actually kind of chilly here today. It was in the low 60s.
So
we're roughing it.
It's 4
I took off my North Face jacket so I could show off my Snake Plissken shirt. So for everybody,
I'm in my house. I'm wearing a hoodie, and
I was going to say,
that's how cold it is.
I'm rocking the Manson Brothers t-shirt, of course.
Love it.
Nice.
Love it.
Of course.
Representing.
We are going to talk Manson Brothers. We are going to talk wrestling. We're going to talk all kinds of things. So my first question is, how long you guys know each other? Where did you guys meet?
We about 25 years, right?
Yeah. Actually, Mike was the first guy I think I actually talked to. I was coming into. We both worked primarily for Windy City Professional Wrestling back in Chicago, and I was a new guy coming in to my first practice ever, and it just so happened, I think, that it was a meeting day, and the two things I remember were I walked in. And if you remember Alan Niles, Mike, these were these huge, massive guys who were tagging, massive. Huge. And I remember walking back in, and we had a gym behind the curtain of the studio. And I opened the door, and one of them is curling 225. And I'm like, holy shit, what did I get myself into? And so I go through the curtain, and thankfully I see a bunch of dudes who were smaller than me, like Jimmy Kleckner was there and guys like that. So it was okay. But I bumped into Mike. Mike and I started chatting. We were both into martial arts at the time,
and acting and
all that kind of stuff. And you know, he was getting. And I don't know if I'm telling the story. Mike was a few months later getting out because he was going to the fire department out of wrestling, and he was in a group called the Brotherhood that were the Manson Brothers. And so he suggested to the other guys, "Hey, you should take on this guy Chris as my replacement." And the rest is history. Awesome. And that was back in that was like 95 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah, something. And the funny thing was, people asked us, "Oh, like when you guys wrestled together, how much?" I'm like, "We never stepped foot in the ring together until we shot that scene."
Yeah, we never
in the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie. That's the first time we're ever in the ring together.
Yeah.
So how long had you been in the business, Mike, before you met Chris? Because you said you're on your way out.
I broke into the business in 1990 when I got out of the Marine Corps. Okay. And my goal was to segue that into a film career. Well, things happen, and, you know, families come along and responsibilities, and you're not making as much money as you thought. And so I got out. You know, I think I started to think that it wasn't going to be a full-time thing, probably in 95. Okay. And so I left for a while, and then I came back in early of 97, which is where I met Chris. And I was only there for about probably a year or so. And then I left, and I was done. So I was probably in, like, you know, all told, probably 8.5 years altogether. You know, but straight, I was in for about 5-6 years before I left. I left a bunch of times because me and the promoter didn't get along, or, you know, something better came along, whatever it was, you know.
Yeah. So I'd imagine it's hard to live the life with the family. From what I've heard, when it comes to wrestling, you're on the road so much and going from town to town, that it's kind of hard to make that work.
Well, I guess it's like being in a music business or you know, a film business or whatever, where you're away a lot. But in wrestling, I guess wrestling would be much more like the film business, or the music business, where you're in a different town every day, you know, and you're really gone a lot. To be fair and honest, we had a very small loop we ran between Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, a little bit of Michigan, a little bit of Iowa. You know, occasionally we would venture out past that. But, you know, we were a small promotion. Although when I broke in, which was at the very beginning of 1990, like January of 1990, Windy City Wrestling was like the largest independent promotion in the country. So there's territories were still around. So you still had Texas Territory, World Class Championship Wrestling. You still had UWF. in Texas, Louisiana, and all that. You still had
Lawler was still running big in
Memphis,
Tennessee.
right?
It
You
was
still had
big,
right.
Yeah.
And NWA was not WCW yet. It was NWA still. They had a bunch. There was still Pacific Wrestling. There was still Stampede up in Canada. So there was a lot of territories still, which was cool. You know, so back then you could make a living being in a territory before, you know, now it's like a couple of guys make great money and everybody else makes crap. Before that, everybody made
just like the movie industry.
Right. Yeah, you're able to cut a living at it. And you know, after when Vince took everything over, when he nationalized everything, it killed the business really, because there's no competition. First of all, there's no competition.
It killed the ability for everybody to make good money. You know, guys could move around.
Well, then they had to make their own stars then. You know, before when a guy would show up in WWF or a guy would show up in Mid-Atlantic, you would think, oh, this is a new guy. No, that guy's been around for years. He just wasn't exposed in that territory because everything was regional.
Right.
So, and then when I broke into, and I think Chris at the tail end of it, you still had to be like 6'6" and weigh like 300 pounds. You know, Vince at the time, this was like 92, 93, where boy, so when I broke in, you could be a fairly good sized guy. Like you could be 6 foot and be 225, 230 and be okay. But around 92, if you weren't like the size of the Warlord or the Barbarian, they weren't going to look at you, or Nikita Koloff, whatever. They weren't going to look at you. So it was about that time where I'm like,
when I was in there, they were starting to get more of the Jericho guys, but you had to be.
Yeah, you came in at sort of the beginning of that second
you know what I mean?
phase of it.
Right.
I always find it funny because if you watch Jericho now, and probably for the last decade, you know, he's a grounded, you know, boots and stomp worker for the most part. But when he came in,
he's 50.
He was an aerial guy, you know. But my point is that he was able to create a great character as an aerial guy, and then move that away from that type of work as he got older, and nobody really cared that he wasn't, you know, that he's 5'10" and 185 or whatever it is. You know?
Right. Yeah, barely 220 or whatever.
And Michaels was the same way. I mean, he did the same, you know, he did the same thing. He was kind of the first, I think, of the athletic, you know,
smaller guy.
I wouldn't call him a high flyer so much, but he could just get around so well.
Yeah, he could work. Like him and Jannetty and those guys, you know, were still, they were smaller guys, but they could really work. And
that's the thing I think it was like when you watch Shawn Michaels, I mean, it was like, oh my God, this guy is like the best worker I've ever seen in my life. You couldn't keep him down because of his size.
Right.
And he worked great against big men. You know, he was a great big man worker.
And people could say what they want, personality this, personality that. But the fact of the matter is, he worked his ass off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He took a lot of, I mean, that guy paid his dues, number one.
Mean bumps.
Absolutely. And he's a great worker. I mean, he's got to be in the top 3 to 4 guys as far as working goes. And I'm going to talk about all around. Can work the mic, great character, you know, that kind of stuff.
Good physique, the whole thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many guys.
No.
For me, when we talk about high flyers, Rey Mysterio was the first one that I really looked at in WCW. Him and Udo Guerrero and all the luchadors.
Yeah, and those guys were small, you know, and it was like I love seeing those guys get over.
Mysterio's really small. I mean, he's but you know what? Tiny. I always thought he did an awesome job too of crafting the way he worked flyer stuff against big men to make it look cool, you know, and to make it look like it was stuff that was actually would work.
Yeah.
I think that's the other key to it. You know, there's so much of the stuff. Like I watched some stuff the other night, and I couldn't believe what a spot fest it was, and it was driving me insane.
Was it AEW or WWE?
It was AEW, who, you know, I think is taking leaps and bounds, and I think they're going to take over New York before it's all over because they got the money. But man, that particular match I watched was horrible. And I'd watched some really good matches that they had too, and it kind of bugged me. But
I guess
wrestling will always be the same, though. You'll always have matches that are awesome, and you'll always have matches that are the drizzling shits.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, that's my next question. So, you will still watch it currently?
I don't. Mike doesn't. I didn't for a really long time. I actually used to watch Impact a lot.
Okay.
Back when like James Storm and who's the British guy? He was Magnus or whatever his name was.
Yes.
So like that circa, I watched quite a bit. Plus, we had a guy that we worked with who was a pretty big name for them. Christopher Daniels was big in Impact. And recently, I've just started to kind of watch AEW just because I don't know, it looks like something different. And,
Yeah.
you know, but it does seem to me that what they are doing is giving the fans actually what they want.
Yeah.
And that I have not seen New York do in forever. And,
No.
and you know,
I'll tell you, I used to love watching it when I was in the business because we would watch what other guys were doing. And at the time it was kind of funny because you would do something and the next week somebody else in New York would be doing it. And our promoter used to tell us, they're watching you guys. They're watching you guys. They're biting. They stole our Brotherhood gimmick in 1997. Right after, it was like, I think it was, you know, the Harris brothers. Is that their names? Those two twins?
I think so. Yeah, the tall guys.
Twins.
Tall,
they're twins. Yeah, tall guys. And then
Is that four twins?
Brian, what was his name? Brian Adams. And then the guy that
I think it was Brian Lee and
the second Undertaker.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
And they stole our name. Yeah, they stole our name, the Brotherhood. They stole our gimmick. And then after that, our friends Kevin Quinn and who was the other guy? Was it Daniels that was with him that were the American males or the US?
Yeah, it was Daniels. Those two went to Puerto Rico.
Right. They went so they were the US males and the whole gimmick, and Buff Bagwell and the other guy came back as the American males. They totally stole the gimmick. Completely stole the gimmick. So, you know, they watched. So it was fun to do that kind of stuff. And the business was different. Like I said, it was still territorial when I was in. And so they still had like guys like Terry Gordy and Funks and, you know, these guys, Michael Hayes, these guys who were like 60s, 70s style wrestlers. Like you know, the Ultimate Warrior day, and he was a good friend of mine, so I don't want to talk shit about him. But he, you know, those days of guys just being so big and walking to the ring as a spectacle had just kind of maybe started. You know, the Road Warriors were still around and they were still in their heyday. So that was fun to watch. And I don't watch it not for any particular reason. I just don't watch it because I'm not involved in it. And so my son is 9 and he kind of watches it every now and again. I took him to a match a couple of years ago in Chicago where WWF came down, and I watched it and they did a good job, but I noticed like they're all the same. It's like after the Attitude Era, like everybody was the same. And I wasn't into the character era where everybody had to have a repo man and a milkman and a barber and a plumber.
That was the worst.
I
hated
that shit. Right? I hated that shit. But now everybody's rebelling against the system. It's not like
Mike's secret favorite was Bastion Booger. Bastion Booger was his secret favorite.
Right. Bastion Booger. Right. Wasn't he John? Wasn't that John? Wasn't he Mucka Singh?
He was Mucka Singh up in Stampede forever. Yeah.
And then he worked in World Class for a while.
He did.
Yep. He was what was
Tojo Yamamoto or whatever he was, or
he was somebody Norman the Lunatic.
Oh yes,
he was Norman the Lunatic.
He was
and then he was Mucka Singh. Yeah, he was great. He was a fun guy.
So
but,
I'm going to tell you this though. Speaking of recent wrestling, I watched the WrestleMania that was the first one where they had fans.
Okay.
From Tampa, I think in 2020. It was the first post COVID.
Oh, post COVID. You're talking about? I'm like fans.
Yeah. No. Two nights, and both nights were main evented by women. And both those matches stole the show. It was the best two matches I had seen.
Yes.
And I was going to say, when I took my son, the first match was like, it was Survivor Series. And the first match was girls. And it was like Charlotte and Bailey and a bunch of those girls. And I don't know them all. But they killed it. They were awesome.
Oh my God.
And somebody got hurt in the middle of the match. So it threw the whole thing off, because when you do a big match like that, there's a lot of moving components.
Right.
But these chicks managed to put it back together, and it was really good. It was the first best match of the night. It really was. It was awesome.
What you were talking about, Chris, was one of them was Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks. They made them into one night, and I think Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair.
No, it was actually Rhea Ripley and the Japanese gal.
Yes,
and that match was insane. I can't think of her name. Asuka. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, Rhea Ripley, I think, is a superstar in the mix.
That's one of the best things of modern wrestling, was that the girls were so much better now.
Yeah.
That like when I broke in because we worked with the girls all the time, but they did not work like that. Like, so for whatever reason in the 50s and 60s, the girls worked really well, like a 50s, 60s, even 70s. You know,
but they looked like your PE teacher. So
well, yeah, but then they lost it over time, and you had, you know, like what was her name? Wendy Richter. I mean, Wendy Richter could work, but it was a slower kind of work, and it was a little.
What's her face could really work. Who was the gal that dumped the belt in the trash can?
Medusa.
Oh, Medusa Michelli. Yeah.
She could get around, dude. She could work.
Yeah.
To your point, though, that second match with what was her name, Bianca Banks,
Bianca Belair and Banks. Sasha
yeah,
Banks.
that was a hell of a match too.
Well, here's the problem.
That thing was.
They have both Rhea and Sasha and Bianca have all slid down the cards now.
Yeah.
Like they're not even. Charlotte Flair is running.
Every time Charlotte Flair comes back, they bury all of them.
It's very political, man.
I'm political, man.
I don't have to. I'm telling you, and I haven't been involved in the business, and I have no clue what goes on in New York behind the scenes. I don't know anybody there, but I know the business, and I'm telling you, it all has to do with politics. If who's pissing somebody off, whose kid is getting a push, because everybody now is a legacy, you know, or a relative of somebody.
That's actually another problem. I think everybody's a relative of somebody, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean,
unless of course you're Dustin Runnels, who never really got, you know, that guy never was able to really get over that well.
He was kind of the first of the. Well, look at Mysterio's kid, man.
And he can work his ass off. And I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I don't know him, but he really can work his ass off. You know.
Have you seen Rey Mysterio's kid?
He's good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but he looks like he's 14.
yeah.
I mean, seriously, he's like,
well, you
when you
remember
see
the
this
whole
guy,
David Flair debacle?
Oh my
dude, he makes David Flair look like Bruno Sammartino. I'm not kidding you.
And I want to talk shit, man. I like all those guys, but I mean, it's like it's hard. Not everybody can do it. I mean, I couldn't. Listen, I was a decent worker. I was good for Chicago. I mean, I was a name here for a while.
Not for everybody.
We had the belts and all that, and it wasn't just because we had a nice gimmick. We could work.
Yeah.
But it's tough. Like, I don't know if I had gone to one of the larger promotions, if I'd have lasted that long. I don't, mostly because I don't like to take shit from anybody.
Right.
Which was like, you know, what John, my friend John was like, he worked in World Class in Japan. He was a big name over there. He trained, worked with Brody and all those guys. And he told me, Mike, they'll bury you because you won't take any shit, and they'll wind up firing you and jabbing you off.
One of my favorite people that is wrestling right now, well, hopefully he keeps up where he's doing, but Walter. He's in NXT UK. He's an Austrian wrestler. He just came over to the States now, so he's in NXT under the name Gunther. Now they just changed his name for no reason at all.
They always do that. I don't know why New York does that.
Dumbest shit of all time, especially when they have their own feeder group now, and all these people get to know these guys. And then they bring them up and turn them into someone else.
Okay, so listen, I'm going to tell y'all something crazy.
One of the funniest things ever is, so they brought John Nord. This is going back to the early 90s. Mm-hmm. So they brought John Nord from AWA, right? So originally John Nord was Nord the Barbarian, right? Then they couldn't call him Nord the Barbarian anymore because what's his name? The
Barbarian was around.
The Barbarian,
right?
but his first name, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember his first name, but anyway, we know what we're talking about. So Conga. So Conga was North, it was the Barbarian. So they stripped him of that. Then they brought him into New York and they called him the Viking for about 3 matches because Tony the Viking Halme had, I don't know if he had copywritten the name or something like that. So they couldn't call him the Viking. So they started calling him the Berserker, because then they were going to bring Tony the Viking Halme in as Tony the Viking Halme. Then they brought him in and they never used him as that. They called him, the hell was his name?
And didn't they turn John Nord into Yukon
Ludwig
John Nord
something or other?
Oh yeah, Ludwig von Borga.
Okay, Ludwig von Borga. So then John. Yeah, they totally. I mean, what's the point? I don't get it.
Here's the worst part with Walter. So they trademarked the name like 3 weeks ago for Gunther Stark. Gunther Stark is a Nazi U-boat commander, like legitimately a Nazi U-boat commander.
That never flies well.
They changed it to Gunther. Now, Twitter, everybody went crazy. This was last Tuesday this happened. By now, they've already dropped the Stark and just keeping it Gunther, and they abandoned the trademark. It's like
I hear Vince. I have always heard that Vince does shit just to make people do shit. Like I just heard that.
How do you think Terry Taylor was the Red Rooster?
Yeah,
that's Vince
or the polka dot gimmick for Dusty. Remember that thing?
Yeah, Virgil. No, not
I don't
Virgil.
read that much about it, but I was just reading today how much they've overhauled NXT and how much they've screwed it up and everything. And I was just reading that they asked all of the trainers to dye their beards and their hair because they didn't think the coaches looked young enough for the guys who were in the thing.
Yep.
And, who were training. And it's like, are you fucking serious?
They just fired William Regal.
Again?
Yeah. They fired him.
I love that guy. And I'll tell you why.
He's lucky he didn't shoot on him.
Badass. William Regal's a hooker. He's one of the few hookers in the business left because he was trained as a hooker.
Yeah.
Well, he got fired from WCW because he kicked the shit out of Goldberg.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that one.
Although Jericho kicked the shit out of Goldberg too, and nobody fired him for that. So
that's true. That's true.
Because Regal's not Goldberg.
Yeah. Well, no, Regal's not Jericho.
Rather. Yeah, and I always loved Regal. Was one of those guys that I heard of when he came in, when he first started with NWA or Atlanta rather. And they were like, this guy's a hooker. He came over from England. And the other guy that was even more of a badass was his partner from Canada. What was it? Is from England.
Dave.
Dave Taylor.
No.
He was even a bigger badass.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they didn't even
Regal will legitimately rearrange your bones. That guy's he's real bad.
I love watching him wrestle. I love watching him wrestle. He's one of my favorites. Kurt Angle's one of my favorites.
Angle's another guy.
Brock Lesnar, I enjoyed early work. Brock Lesnar. Now he's kind of more one note, just suplex, walk away.
Well, he doesn't have to do anything else, so why would he?
Yeah, that's true.
You know who I always loved to watch wrestle?
Who's that?
The Boogie Woogie Man,
Sailor Art
Thomas. No, Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man, and it was because everything he did looked like a dance.
Yeah,
he would do a move, and he was still moving into the next move, and everything he did was just. It was just constant motion. It was awesome.
I'll tell you how old I am. I remember when there was the Valiant Brothers.
Yes.
And it was Jimmy, Johnny, and there was another guy I can't remember before he became the Boogie, before he grew his beard out and became a biker.
The Boogie Man.
Yeah, when he was a flashy guy in the early 70s when Bruiser was still really big in Chicago.
So I started my background goes to Ultimate Warrior days. That was Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan. That's when I started watching. When it was all larger than life characters. Yeah. And then it kind of went to more actual wrestlers and I was
Ultimate Warrior was a very, very close friend of mine.
That was one.
Don't cry about that.
Insane main event, man. In Toronto.
Yeah. They both did great. I mean, those.
I was going to say both guys actually worked a pretty good match. Shockingly,
for two guys who are notorious for saying they couldn't work, really did a good job, and they both gave 100%. And I know Hulk probably talked a lot of shit about it but I think in fairness, after Warrior passed away, Hulk came out and said the right thing, which was they both worked their ass off. And I'll tell you what, Warrior was he was a really good guy, and I knew him very well, and he was not the guy that everybody thought he was, and he was not the guy that you saw. The only thing that was the same about him in the ring was that he had this positive energy about him that you could not be around the guy and not be inspired by him. Like everything he really was like that. He really was doing 100% at all times. He really was always trying to improve himself. He really wanted to inspire other people. That was not a gimmick. Mm-hmm. That was really him. Yeah. And he was a really, really intense guy. Like even to be with him, I would have to be like, hey, come. Right. Like, and I'm a pretty intense guy, but he was a real intense guy. He was
I think that came across in all his characters, man. I remember the first time I ever saw him in World Class when he was the Dingo Warrior, and I was like, this dude's going to be a superstar. And then it was like a month later, he was in New York.
He's a very driven guy, and he had the kind of personality that either people wanted to be like him or they fucking hated him for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you ever get a chance, there's a really great video from when him and Sting were whatever. They
The
weren't
Blade
even,
Runners.
Yeah,
they
Oh,
weren't even the Blade Runners.
No, you're talking about when they were in Memphis?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're in Memphis, and they're
Jim
just
was
two,
like
bodybuilders.
300 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're cutting a promo, and they're basically cutting a promo on how fat all the rest of the guys are in Mid-South. And these two guys come out, and dude, it literally looks like two guys from the crowd that just rolled in from a buffet at Shoney's or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's actually two of the top workers in the business
In Memphis.
and one of them, one of them's bald or like balding, and it's so funny to watch because it's like these two clowns would never have a prayer being in wrestling now.
I'll tell you want to watch, if you're an Ultimate Warrior fan, you want to watch something really interesting.
Yeah.
There is a video, it may be still on YouTube, I don't know. It's from Georgia wrestling when the Iron Sheik was there, and he's doing his Indian club thing, and he picks a guy out of the audience to see if he can do the Indian clubs, and it's Warrior. And he's before he was in the business when he was Mr. Georgia, and he's like every bit of 300 pounds. I mean, he's absolutely way more massive than he was when he was in New York. He's huge, and he can't do it. And I don't know, because I didn't catch the video until after he had passed away. So I never got to ask him if that was a work or not. But my gut feeling was that it wasn't a work, that it was the real thing, because he told me that he used to go hang out at those matches when he was in college. So who knows? Awesome. But if you YouTube that one, it's kind of interesting to see it. He's real young. He's got a mustache, I think.
I'm a huge, like I said, horror and wrestling. I'm a huge fan.
Like peanut butter and chocolate, man.
Exactly. Which leads me into, so after you guys met in wrestling, where did the idea come for this movie?
Oh, that is a very
I mean, to really condense it, Mike had seen me in another film, which he may be one of only like 10 people that have ever seen this movie. So that was Frankenstein Day of the Beast.
Okay.
And so what happened
kind of liked it. I wouldn't talk shit about it, but it was pretty good.
I just say that for fun because I'm trying to be an asshole. But so I had done a couple really, really, really low budget films in Chicago with this director named Ricardo Islas, who's a good dude, really good guy. And he had called me and said, "Hey, I wrote this Frankenstein movie. I was living in LA now." And he's like, "And I totally wrote this part for you. Is there any way you could come back? We're going to shoot it in a couple weeks." So I said, "Yeah, sure." I went back and did it. Had a lot of fun. And we premiered it at two different theaters. And it just so happened that Mike's buddy was the projectionist at one of the theaters, and they had left the DVD behind. And so he grabbed the DVD and says, "Hey, Mike, you want to watch this DVD, this Frankenstein movie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And, midway through the movie, you should probably tell the story, Mike. But Mike says, "Man, I swear to God, I know that guy." And of course, if you know Mike, he knows everybody, right? So his buddy says, yeah, whatever. Well,
yeah, whatever, Mike. I'm watching it. Now, I hadn't seen Chris in a few years. The last time I had seen him was probably at
he doesn't remember the last time he had seen me.
And I don't remember it, right? And I didn't remember that he was even there because I was so hammered. But before that, I had seen him was when he was still in the business. So he was bigger and he had a beard and his hair was longer. But in this movie, he had lost a lot of weight. He was much as he is now. And when I was watching it, he looked familiar to me, but I wasn't used to seeing him like that. So I didn't know. So I'm telling my buddy, this guy looks, and his name wasn't at the beginning of the credits. So, and I'm like, I'm like, I know him. I'm like, that's my friend Chris. And my friend Jerry's like, "Oh yeah, Mike, you know everybody." So I had Chris's number and I texted him. I'm like, "Dude, I'm watching this Frankenstein movie, and I swear to God, this guy looks just like you. Is that you?" And he's like, "Yeah, it is." So then we started talking again because I was acting in Chicago and I'd been in a bunch of TV shows and a couple of films. I make a living at it. And a couple of years later, I went out to LA to visit Max Martini because he and I had done a TV series together. Mm-hmm. So I was out there and I had a couple of friends from the Marines that lived there and Chris. So I'm like, well, let's get together. So we did. And I was actually out there trying to figure out how to get this other script that I had written off the ground, which was a drama. And I was there. My friend Lee Ettinger was there and he was producing at the time. And he told me, "Dude, you're never gonna get this thing off the ground. You're a first-time writer. It's a drama. Nobody's gonna want to put money in a thing. Da, da, da. And Chris tells me the exact same thing. Like, man, you gotta do a low-budget horror movie. You gotta have a vampire in it or a zombie or something. And I'm like, dude, I can't write anything scary. I wouldn't even know where to start. So long story long, my plane got canceled the next day to go home. So I was sitting in the hotel, put me up this hotel in LA, and I'm sitting there. And I had this idea for a while. So it wasn't the first time I had it, about a masked wrestler movie, because I loved these old Santo the Wrestler movies from Mexico. I loved them. They're so cheesy and cool and good. But I thought, well, what if there was two of them and they were the Manson brothers? And so I called him up and I said, I got an idea, but here's the deal. You got to do it with me. And no matter how ludicrous it is, we have to play it straight. He's like, I'm in. So I wrote the skeleton for it in a few weeks, sent it to him. And he's like, I like this. And then it just kind of developed from there. And then we started collaborating and throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what different, I mean, it went through so many different variations. There were different characters that were not represented in the film when the final draft happened. Yeah. We almost got it off the ground a few times on different budgets, anywhere from 100,000 to $500,000. And finally, by luck, Max, got some people together and pulled his resources because he liked the script and he had just directed a very serious film called Will Gardner about PTSD, about veterans with PTSD, which was great. If nobody's seen it, please watch it. Sergeant Will Gardner. And he wanted to do something different. And our producer, Mike Haggerty, wanted to do something different because he was tired of being depressed all day too. And I don't think doing Manson Brothers made him any less depressed.
Probably not.
But we had a lot of fun. So anyway, that's how that came about.
A big part of that too was we kept thinking to ourselves, who in the hell is going to watch a movie with two leads that nobody knows who they are, right?
Right.
So we came up with the idea to wear masks just like Santo and Blue Demon, literally the entire movie, until there was 30 seconds left in the movie. We were going to take the masks off. So it was like the kiss reveal. So you waited the whole time to see if it was going to happen. And then that went so far that I drove to to Albuquerque, New Mexico from California wearing a mask. And I was taking pictures and sending them to Max and Mike, and I'd have a mask on in my car. And so we go through what, Mike? 2 weeks of rehearsals?
2 weeks. Probably. Yeah. We're like a week away from shooting the thing.
Yeah. So one day we come in the morning and we started to rehearse, and I said, you know what? We should do this in the mask. We haven't done anything in the mask yet. Put the masks on. Mike and I do our shit, and we look over, and Max is looking at us like, oh, fuck. Pardon my French. He's like, the comedy is gone. Everything is gone. He's like, the masks have completely killed everything. Oh, and everybody, oh my God, we all go crazy and
we're screwed.
Regroup on what to do.
We're screwed.
So we're trying to figure out, should we, take them on and put them off? What are we going to do? Blah, 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 blah. And we eventually, land on, hey, we're not going to wear them until it's like crux moments. And here's how we'll get them. Because originally our regular everyday masks were the exact replica of the Enchanted masks, except they were just a different color. We went from black and white to blue and silver for Santo and Blue Demon.
And Skull hates them just like a little kid would because they're a different color, even though they're exactly different color. The same. That was a little inside joke.
But that was literally a 90 some odd page rewrite in a couple of days because
we literally rewrote the whole film.
We had to backtrack through everything and make sure all the mask parts were, detailed properly.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about rewrite or versions before, but I mean, that was like a massive
and there were
version.
things that got totally cut out because we didn't have masks. So there were jokes like, the Manson brothers, you never, ever saw them without the masks. Mm-hmm. That was the thing. Nobody really knew who they looked like. Not the promoters, not the other wrestlers. They were so used to seeing them in the mask because what caught me about the Santo movies was Santo and Blue Demon would be running around with their wrestling attire on in the middle of a fancy restaurant where everybody's dressed to the nines and nobody notices.
Yes.
No one notices.
Or cares.
Or cares. And so I thought, well, that's really sort of interesting. We could really blow that up. So we did, and again, Chris said, so because nobody's going to want to see two nobodies anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured at least at the end of the movie, whether you liked it or hated it, you'd want to see who was under the hood. You'd be interested to see it. So at the very end, we take the mask off, and that's where you finally see the Manson Brothers. But again, it didn't work out that way. We were very hesitant to not wear them, even though Max didn't want us to wear them from the beginning. He thought it was a mistake. It bared him out that he was correct. I still think if we would have done it a different way, we could have made it work and it would have been interesting, but we just didn't have time to like.
It's an example of one of those things when you're writing a film that you argue about and argue about and argue about and argue about.
We argued about it for 3 months.
So there's
guys got to lose the mask. Guys, those were like, no.
And what's so crazy is there's an old saying in the music business, you get a lifetime to write your first album and 5 months to write your second. When we sat down to write the second script, I mean, it was just like, because we already had passed all of kind of the humps of getting the first stuff out, you know what I mean? And there was so much character stuff that we did over the 5 years that we wrote it that just got flushed down the toilet when Max went out the window.
So by this time, you guys had already had all the money raised when you had that script completed before you had to rewrite the whole thing?
Yeah, we were in production
twice.
Oh,
twice.
We rewrote it twice
because we had to move from. It was set in Chicago, and 3 weeks before we were going to shoot in Chicago, we got we're moving to New Mexico. so we had to change the whole thing for New Mexico.
It's a Chicago movie. We're not shooting New Mexico, and they're like, well, and
yeah, we are.
rather than. And they're like, well, there are parts of Santa Fe that could look like Chicago. And me and him are like, no, they don't.
No fucking way.
So rather than pretend New Mexico was Chicago, we just decided to set it there, and it worked out fine. I mean, here's what we learned.
And by the way, New Mexico was awesome.
It was awesome. Like, I love it. I love New Mexico. I'm a proud citizen of New Mexico. I love New Mexico. Here's what we learned too. And I think one of our strong suits, we may not be very good writers. That I think that's up to, scrutiny. But here's what we are good at. He and I are very good at adapting. We're not the kind of guys that, because we heard horror stories from other writers that were like, oh, we couldn't do this and we shut the whole thing down. We couldn't figure it out. That ain't us. You come to us, you tell us we can't do something. It won't work, or it's not in the budget. We're like, okay, we'll do something else and we'll make it just as good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was
a lot of that.
There was a lot of it because there were big action sequences like that scene in the ring where we have the masks on and we're fighting the zombies. Originally, that was the centerpiece of the entire film. And it was a big scene. There was a lot more stuff that went on there, but we just didn't have the money to do it. So we had to change it. It came out okay.
I really like the way it came out. And just to kind of give you guys a little bit of backstory for me is I was talking to JR before I met you guys, that in flashback. And he was telling me I'm telling you about you guys' premiere. And I talked to you guys at the meet and greet, the cocktail hour before. And I remember watching this, and I said this to you guys after the movie, and I was like, "This reminds me of Demons."
Yeah,
that was the first.
And I swear to God, you told me that.
Yeah,
I went nuts because when we started writing the script, I told him because he hadn't seen Demons, so I sent him the movie. I'm like, "You got to watch this because here's the deal: nothing happens, and then when it starts." It never stops. You don't get a chance to take a breath. And that's how we wanted it to be. And you were the first person that even caught it at all. And I was like, oh my God, I was so blown away by that. It really killed me.
That was 100% on purpose, because of that.
Because of Demon.
I can tell because the dialogue also, and just like the kind of quirkiness seemed to go along with Demons too. Before that went to the whole thing.
Yeah, they create interesting characters. Like the guy that plays the pimp, he's the best character in that film, right? He's still around.
I know. I saw him on Facebook.
He was great. Yeah, him and the girls, they create very interesting characters.
Right.
So it's not that there's nothing going on. There's just no monsters yet. But they create this really in the back, like the bowels of the theater and all that. That's what we wanted to show. We wanted it originally. We wanted an old theater like that's in that movie, and so like I think a year before we actually shot it, where we did, we went to a bunch of old theaters in Chicago to try and we were like, they wanted like $10,000 a day to rent them.
Yeah.
And we were like, what? Wow. We're like, we don't got that kind of money. We don't even have any more kidneys to sell.
No.
So.
But that's the other interesting part was the original film was supposed to take place in a theater. It was just going to be a wrestling match in a theater. Yeah. So,
well, I like I told you guys before we started rolling, like it was perfect the way it was for what you guys are trying to convey. I really, really liked it. And
thank you very much.
No problem. How was it working with Boss Rutan and Randy Couture?
Two very different guys.
How did that come to fruition?
Very the same.
Well, Max was actually, Max got everybody for us.
Okay.
It was, now we had Randy in mind, to play Thump Hanson, who the character that he wound up playing. Mm-hmm. But in mind in the sense of, here's a guy that would be Thump Hanson, right? We never thought in a million years
we were going to get him.
Someone like him. I know. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Someone like him.
And we
thought he could identify with that character.
Yeah, I will still never forget the day that Max told us, yeah, he's going to do it. And we were like, are you shitting? Like,
we were out of our fucking
believe it. Yeah, it was nuts.
Because Max didn't know that we had actually written the character for him.
Randy is one of those guys too that he's the biggest sweetheart in the world. And he's absolutely the opposite of everything you would think he would be.
Yeah.
And that's what was like, he was kind of quiet when we first met him, and it took a little while.
Got to get a couple of bourbons in him.
But once we got him going, oh my God, man, he's
well. Did you meet him? Didn't you meet him, James? At the
we talked for a good amount of time. He's really awesome.
He's super guy, man. I couldn't. Honest to God, we're all very close now, which is great. It was just it was fun, and Boss Rutan too. Become very close with Boss Rutan.
And I'm gonna tell you something about Boss. We went to rehearsal to do his monologue that he does about the parrot.
Yeah.
And he's in full gear already. Mike and I are in our street clothes. We haven't even gone to wardrobe yet.
Right.
And Boss is trotting around in full gear. And first off, you cannot look at him and not laugh. He is the fact that he's one of the baddest sons of bitches that's ever lived is so hilarious because he is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life.
And he's funny all day long.
Yes, all day, every day, funny.
But here's the funny thing about that scene, though. He wasn't originally supposed to do that monologue. That monologue was for Jack Cage, who Jason Coviello plays him. And we had to actually cut it because we had to edit that scene. So when Boss came on, me and Chris told Max, we're going to give Boss this monologue. And Max
he wanted us to beef up he wanted us to beef up his part, remember? Because he had gotten it.
Right, he did, but he originally didn't want him to do the parrot story. And we were like, Max, he'll kill it. So now go ahead and tell what happened.
Yeah, so we go into the rehearsal and, all right, here we go, we're rolling. And he does that story. And I looked over at Mike and I was like, as soon as we cut, I looked at Mike and I was like, it's like he's been telling that story for 30 years.
Yeah.
It was so good.
And we laughed every time he did it. We were laughing our ass off.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It was so funny.
It was hard to keep a straight face. He was so good.
God.
It was.
And he told us he was having a hard time keeping a straight face when we were doing the Mom's Mexican bit.
Yeah, when we were going back and forth. Yeah,
but, here's an interesting inside baseball. So originally, Evil Dutch Decker was not a character in the film. Originally, that character was called Bull Cali, and he was supposed to be played by Tiny Lister, who is no longer with us. Yeah. But Tiny went to jail, I think, and we couldn't get him.
So we tried to get Bob Sapp too. Remember, we wanted to get.
Bob Sapp. We were trying to get Bob Sapp.
And, we were trying to get Bob
and
Sapp. A couple other guys.
So we had to change it from a really giant black dude to a badass Dutch guy.
Yeah, a little Dutch guy who sounded funny. It's like, yeah. But so I wish, this is one of the things that I wish, because we only had Boss for like 2 days, right?
Right.
I think 2 or 3 days
on the shoot. Whereas we had Randy for like 3 weeks. So Randy was around all the time, which was awesome. But it would have been great to have the two of them together for that amount of time.
Yeah.
You know, in the
we had days where we were all together, where Boss and Randy, because we have pictures with them, so I know they were there.
But I mean, not like,
I remember really, but they're just.
There was a lot more social time.
Boss
with
is
Randy
so fun, and I mean, every once in a while, you know, but Chris and I and the guys from the cast talk pretty much every day. We have a thread, and it's me, Chris, Randy, Adrian Pazdar, Dave Meadows, who plays Carson, our stunt coordinator. Every once in a while, Jay Lund, who plays Captain Marvelous, Boss is on it, and DB is on it, although they don't chime in too much. But we talk with these guys every day. It's really weird.
I was going to say, we probably gotten texts while we've been sitting here on this.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We talk every day, and it's really fun. I mean, it was really a family atmosphere on the set. And I think to a person, cast and crew came up to us and said, it was the most fun set we've ever worked on. And for us, that's all we needed to hear. And we were validated
ever, man.
Because we wanted that. We've both worked on shitty sets, believe me. And we weren't going to do that. We were like, listen, we may not be nobodies. We may be nobodies. But we're driving the bus here.
Yeah.
So we're going to make sure everybody to a person,
I think particularly
feels valued.
If you saw the amount of alpha males on this set, man, it was like beyond and everyone just kind of deferred to the other guy. There was no, it was the opposite posture. You know what I mean? It was crazy.
Get over on anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the two of the baddest guys in the world, right? Are sitting in the room with you, and you got Dave Meadows, who's a Navy SEAL sniper. You know, these are, you know, and we all have our own respective reputations. That could have gone really badly, but it didn't. Yeah, everybody was just
it was exactly the opposite. Yeah,
exactly the opposite. Nobody was afraid to show their ass, in scenes and stuff, because everybody supported everybody. It was really one of the greatest experiences of my life. And even if it wasn't our film, I would say that.
Yeah,
it really was.
On screen, you can see it on screen that it was a family affair, like a labor of love for everyone involved.
It totally was.
It totally was. You guys, of course. Now, my next question is: so how challenging is it to be the main stars as well as writers? Was it hard, or would it make it easier since you're writing it to act in it?
I think it made it a little easier for us in some senses and harder in another. In one sense, I think it was easy because we wrote the material. So we weren't trying to interpret someone else's words, which as an actor is a big challenge because you didn't write that. You don't know what it is. You don't know the intent of the writer. You have to figure that stuff out. In this case, we wrote it. So we know what the writer's intent was because we were the writers. We know how it was supposed to be delivered. Now, acting it, even that, there were days like where we were screwing our own dialogue up. There was one day I could not get it right. And I remember saying, I wrote the fucking shit and I can't get this right. Like excuse my language. I wrote the words and those exact words and I couldn't figure it out. And it was challenging. And it was also challenging because the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
If you're not,
I think it was easier, like Mike said, from the perspective of you wrote the stuff. So you kind of know how you want to deliver it. You kind of know what you want to do. You know how you want to say it. The little nuances of it. I think, I don't think it was a challenge from the challenging part about writing and acting was that we were having to write and act on the same day.
Right.
And there's only so many hours in a day. I mean, literally it was 19 hours, most.
Yeah.
I never
get very little sleep,
3 or 4 hours a night for 3 weeks,
if that. Yeah. Also, too, I think we also had such a great, like you had actors like Pazdar and DB Sweeney. They're just absolute pros, and Max is a great actor. And
I think the
Jay
big
Lund,
testament,
who plays Captain Marvelous. I mean, just elevated us.
Yeah. I think the big testament, and it goes out to Max for a million reasons. He got not only great name actors, but he got great actors that were not names.
And they gave a shit.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. I think, a lot of times you'll get names and they'll wire in the performance just for the paycheck, the whole thing. None of those guys did that. If anything, they came over prepared. And I mean that in the best possible way.
Right.
And I think, at least for me, when you're leading a movie, it can be, there's a lot of pressure to it, right? Especially when it's your own thing and there's a lot of money.
Everybody else could be good, but if you fall flat,
it's dead in the water. But I think those guys, everybody kind of, you kind of had to rise to that. You know what I mean? You kind of had to hit that all the time.
Yeah.
And I think too, Max gave as a director, which I really appreciated as an actor, but not so much for us, but for the other guys like DB and Adrian. And Adrian said this to me on set, that he appreciated the fact that this character was so cool that he could paint it with such a broad brush, right? That he wasn't being micromanaged. He really, so DB and Adrian, those guys really created those characters themselves. Chris and I can't take really a lot of credit for those two particular characters because they really created them. I mean, we did write them, but
those were 4-line characters though when we wrote it.
Right. They really breathed a lot of life into. Gave us some ideas, and I mean, we came up with the characters themselves, the nitrous huffing doctor and the the shady promoter, whatever. But DB came up with a lot of that stuff, and Adrian just took that character and ran with it. Like he was going to be the shady guy that may or may not be a doctor. You don't really even know. And that was really great. And Randy really got a chance to do, because Randy doesn't get a lot of chance to do comedy. So he really liked that. And then we had Jay Lund, who played Captain Miserable. Like we had a guy cast named Chad Ario, who's a friend of ours and a comedian here in Chicago. And the guy's really a talented dude. So when we were doing the movie in Chicago, he was cast to play Captain Marvelous, and he was fucking great. And me and Chris were like, we're never going to find anybody else to play this character. And they didn't want to use any of our cast. And when we saw Jay Lund read for Captain Marvelous, Chris and I both were like, that's the guy. Like he hit him in a nutshell.
And he was the first guy we saw.
Yeah,
he was the first guy. Max was like, "I've got him. You got to see this guy. I hope you like it." And so we're watching the videos, and I'm like, "That's him."
And the 100%. Carson character was even funnier because we went through so many named actors that Max had slated to play Carson, or that wanted to play Carson. From, I don't want to mention any names because who knows, but there were some name actors that, and for whatever reason, at the 11th hour, they either backed out. It was a scheduling issue, or they wanted more money, or whatever it was. But Dave was always, he used Dave to read with the other actors. So Dave was originally going to play the Rick Raines part, which I never sort of agreed with, because the minute we saw Dave, Chris and I were like, that's Carson Murdoch, because he read the Carson part for some other actor with whoever else was reading, because that's who Max had. And I'm like, he's Carson. So every time Max would get a name for an actor, we're like, cast Dave Meadows. And he'd be like, no, I got something else in mind for Dave. So I got something else in mind for Dave. And me and Chris were like, oh my God. And finally, at the 11th hour, again, I'll say it, Max comes and was like, guys, I got an idea. How about Dave Meadows for Carson? And me and Chris were like, Max, it's genius, And it was, because Dave.
Here's another independent film moment. This was probably 3 days before we were going to shoot?
3 days.
Wow.
So Meadows comes in and fucking, excuse me.
He comes in day 3 of shooting, and ready to go.
When you watch the movie again, particularly pay attention to Lund and to Jay Lund and to Dave Meadows, and watched how nuanced those performances are. And I mean, I'm saying this, and yes, we're a B film. Yes, we're a low budget horror comedy. But if you watch those performances, those guys are nothing like that in real life. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
And Dave, especially the Carson character, is based on a real guy. And Dave hit it so much on the head that Chris at one point thought that there was contention really on set between him and Dave. That's how good Dave was.
So one of the things that leads you, what was I going to say? So I was thinking about, you were saying that it was a B movie, stuff like that. when before the movie started, I've seen independent films and they all have a certain like look and feel to them. This didn't feel that way at all. Like it felt to me.
I'm glad you say that because I just watched one of those on Tubi last night and I remember thinking, oh my God. Like but that's what, again, I'll go back to Max Martini. He was able to get such a professional crew. Yeah. I mean, these guys were going to do $100 million Netflix movie when we were done, and he was able to corral great
That's a
guys
testament
like that.
to the lighting guys, the cameramen, the cinematographer.
And I think going back to the whole thing, one of the things that I'm the most proud of with this film, and that I think separates it from other movies in the budgetary range and the category, are the performances and what the crew did, because that's something you don't get in films like this generally. And I'm not saying anybody's up for no.
But everybody else is performing.
I'm not talking about Mike and I. I'm talking about everybody else around us. It was. I mean, I never read reviews or anything like that, but the ones that I have read, 99% of them say that. And when I read something that says anything about the performances not being quality, I know it's just complete bullshit, because that's the one thing that I think, again, separates this from other films, in our genre is just performance.
Even the little characters are cast perfectly. Like, I mean, that's not a little character. There are no little characters, but guys who didn't have the characters the parts aren't as large time wise in the film. Like Radiant Bobby, we cast Mike O'Hearn. Max cast Mike O'Hearn, who's like the number one guy for Muscle and Fitness magazine covers in the world. Mm-hmm. And he gets him, and Mike kills it. He's so good and so on point for the really short amount of time he's on screen. He doesn't have a lot of screen time. It just wasn't a large character, but Mike just brings 110. He's one of those guys, brings 110% to whatever he does. And he's so damn good. I mean, really. And one of those few guys that's bigger in real life than he is on camera.
Yeah, they look. Yeah,
absolutely.
But back to your point, I would agree 100%. And I'm glad that you noticed it in the sense that the production values of it are again superior to what you see generally.
Yeah, like that's what we want. Am I trying to be any besmirch of any other? Indie film, but there's a certain look or feel to an indie film that you expect going into it. And I was watching this from the opening scene. I was like, this seems clearly it's indie film, but it seems elevated on a higher scale than some of the
100% Max Martini.
I'm not going to bust on anybody though. I will say in defense of a lot of those other projects, you're talking micro shoestring budgets, and I've been on some, so I know. And we obviously didn't have a studio money to work with. We had a good amount to make it more quality. And unfortunately, you're at the mercy of the kind of cash you have, and that's one of the worst parts about this industry.
We didn't have a big budget either. There was lots of stuff we wanted to do. We just couldn't do it. Yeah. We're lucky that it came out the way it did, really. It looks like we spent a lot more money on it than we did. Yeah. We really got lucky.
And I think what we said previously is like what you guys are trying to accomplish, given the space you had, given what your story was. The grittiness fit with the grittiness of the wrestling, the area you guys were in. It just all fit perfectly. So your budget, had it been higher, may have looked more polished, but the polish might have been a detriment. Like it
would have been, and we didn't want it that way. We wanted it to look gritty and grainy. When we explained it to Max, we're like, we want it to look like an old 70s horror film.
Yeah.
Like
from Europe, like one of these, grainy.
By the way, I tell my wife all the time that too much polish is a bad thing too. So I don't want her to see. I don't want her to want me to get too polished up. So
no. We're not polished guys. We just aren't. You've met us,
Well, so has there been anything that has been surprising to you guys? Like, what were your expectations once this movie came out? Like, has anything just blown your mind? Like, what's been the biggest surprise?
One in a negative way and one in a positive way.
For me, I would say the same thing. Yeah, go ahead.
The first is that how much the people that watch it overwhelmingly love it.
Okay, perfect.
That we get letters from people all the time on it, on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. How much they really love the film and they quote it to us and everything else. Yeah. So that very much surprised me in a good way. In a bad way, I'm surprised that the powers that be don't recognize that they have something here and they're not pushing the film more, because by and large, well, not by and large, for sure, 100%, any promotion it does is Chris and I shouting it from the roof, and Mike Haggerty shouting it from the rooftops, that we have a movie out there. Because if you go on iTunes or Amazon or wherever you watch it, you're probably not going to find it unless you go looking for it. You have to search it. So you have to know it's there. And even though we have a 4.5 or whatever star rating on all these platforms, we have overwhelmingly good, reviews. Like 99% of the reviews are positive. And these aren't people that know us. We don't know the guys from Joe Blow. They put us on their top 10.
I was going to say that one next.
They don't, yeah, we don't. I mean, it surprised me how much people do like it, and it surprised me how short-sighted the powers that be are, that they won't give it decent promotion. Because look, we're trying to do something too, and we know it's a numbers game, and we know, but they'd make a little money if they would just put that much effort.
So I would say the same thing that Mike would say. I think to be more descriptive about it, we've done things that I'm 100% sure to promote our film no other film has ever done. I mean, we were on a NASCAR car. I
was going to get to that too.
At Martinsville on Halloween. We were in USA Today because Mike and I were, because they showed the top 7 cars of the weekend for racing that had a Halloween theme. We
got mentioned in the New York Times when the Alec Baldwin thing happened, and they were talking about how many films are shot in New Mexico and how many low budget ones take advantage of taxing, and they say the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre. There's hundreds of films that shoot in New Mexico, and of all the films they could have picked, they pick ours, probably because of our.
Do you know why? Because of the name. But that's the whole thing again. And so, we went so far as from sponsoring a NASCAR, which cost a ton of money. We hired a PR person who got not only us, but he got Randy on Dennis Miller, for God's sake.
Dennis Miller.
So I think
shout out to Amy Brenner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amy. I don't think again, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble, and I really don't give a shit. But I don't think the efforts have matched what we've done for the project to promote it properly. But with that being said, I'm a true believer that movies like this take a significant amount of time to gain their fan base. But I know that the fan base talks so much and is so. I'm going to go pick up my dog after this interview from the dog groomer. And the last time I saw these people, they were telling me how much they loved horror movies just out of the blue. And I'm like, you got to see this one. You got to see this one. And when I go back, I'm taking a Blu-ray with me, and I'm going to say, here's your tip. Thanks for the dog grooming, and go watch this tonight. Because it's really
I think the acceptance by the horror community in large has been overwhelming for us.
That's been phenomenal for us.
The 2 big events we did, which was Flashback Weekend, and then we did the Dusk Till Dawn Film Festival. We were the first of 4 features, and here's who we were up with: the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Bloodsucking Freaks. Those are 3 serious horror films, right? Classics. We were the first thing. And when it was done, we got an ovation. And I was sitting there because I couldn't hear anything. I'm telling him, we're dying here. We're dying. They hate it. They loved it. By the time we were going to do in between the films, they asked us to go up to the front screen and sign autographs. And through the film, I'm thinking, oh, we're dying on the vine here. There was a line before we even got up there. They had to hold the second movie as long as they could, and they had to cut the line. We couldn't see as many people as were in the line because time wouldn't allow it. They loved it. And that was the biggest test of his acceptance by the horror fans.
And I remember being a part of the Flashback Weekend release, and that was overwhelmingly positive as well. And then the after party, it was a blast. And meeting you guys,
it was shocking.
That movie.
Well, I was going to say my biggest surprise of the whole thing was the reaction after we showed it at Flashback. I could have jumped off the building that night and been a happy guy.
David, I felt like I was living through you guys because I'm trying to do the same thing with my book into a movie. And I know you guys, that was like your moment there because
it really was. When everyone cheered at the end, you literally could have knocked me over. My jaw was hanging open.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And at the party when everybody came up, and it was so, it was so overwhelming and so emotional for
Very
us.
surreal, you know.
It really was. And we had put in so much work. But look, we're fans.
Yeah.
We're horror fans, right? We love the genre. So we don't care that, you know, the Hollywood Reporter didn't have us in there. If they don't like it, we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
We care that horror fans enjoy it. And my biggest thing was because it's not a hardcore horror movie, you know, it's not Hostel or whatever, or the, you know, Devil's Rejects or something really hardcore like that, that people weren't going to like it. But exactly the opposite is true. They appreciate it for what it is and not what it's not, and not don't like it for what it's not.
Right.
And man, it was awesome.
And like you were saying, Chris, I really feel it's going to catch on because, I mean, you look at like a movie like Halloween when it first came out in 78, it didn't come out very strong when it first came out. And then years went on, and now it's one of the biggest movies ever made. So it's
well, I use the example all the time. I don't know if you've seen the movie Terrifier, but so I saw that movie in 2017. I still talk to hundreds of horror fans that have never seen it before. And yet all of a sudden now, 2021, 2022, those guys are headlining conventions. And there's Art the Clown stuff everywhere, you know, and they have done that. They have,
and certainly Stone and Stone Manson are as interesting as Art the Clown.
They're prettier than Art the Clown.
Yes, absolutely.
So actually, I want to do the Manson Brothers versus Art the Clown.
That would be awesome.
But no, I mean, so I think it's very hard to be patient, and believe me, I'm probably the least patient out of all of us for lots of different reasons. But it's. I do, the one thing I do truly believe is that this movie is going to find its audience that is already out there. It's going to get to that audience over time. And, you know, and like I said, I'm proud of it, man. I am
too.
But I'm proud of everybody else's stuff and what was done and the work that went into it. And, you know, the one thing I didn't want to have, and again, I hate to say this, but I turn on Tubi all the time and I watch movies, and most of the time it's fall asleep to them. And I just like you said, they start and I'm like, you know, God, like I couldn't have handled that being what I look at every time. You know what I mean? And
I agree.
I'm fortunate. My son watches it like every other night and can, you know, quote the whole thing.
That's awesome.
And you know, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that my son, you know, loves it and thinks it's awesome. And you know,
I'm always harping on how films look. So, you know, not
he's
that
a much harsher critic than I am.
But I am. That's true. But I think ours looks really good for what we spent on it.
Yes,
really, honestly.
Awesome.
I mean, things can always look better, but this looks really good at it. So that's one of the things that I enjoy about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks as good as it should have, could have, would have, because of what you're trying to convey, and because of where you were, because of
the only thing that would have been better is if we would have been able to shoot it on 16 millimeter film.
Oh, that's too expensive. Awesome. That'd have been awesome.
Yeah, but who can do that? You know, so
yeah, right. We don't have the money for it.
But I mean, I really think you guys are definitely on the way, and I'll do whatever I can to promote as well, just because like we appreciate it, you guys, and I love the movie. I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed meeting you guys, having chat with you guys. You guys are so
well. That's mutual, man. That's reciprocal.
I appreciate that. You guys are so personal as well too. Just like, and you can tell your fans, like you can tell you made a movie that you wanted people to enjoy because you enjoy this type of dialogue and you love horror and wrestling. So what better
and we want to get out there and enjoy it with them. You know, I think that's one of the things
we love going to screenings. We love
go promote people. It. We like talking to people. We love meeting people. You know, we
love encouraging people too that want to do it. We have people coming up to us all the time. They have scripts and they're actors or they're writers or whatever. And so we're going to give you a piece of advice. I know Chris will bear me out with your movie that you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Don't let anybody else tell you what to write, what the content is. Write what you want, because here's the deal. And we went through this too, where we were second guessing ourselves saying, well, what if they don't like this? What if they don't like that? Or there's no movies out there like this or that. But here's the thing. It will find an audience. You have to write it truthfully, for good or better or worse. You have to write it truthfully. If you pretend to write it because somebody else tells you how, you're doomed to failure. Right. You are doomed to failure. You have to be true to yourself, and it'll find an audience. Surround yourself with people that believe in you. Do not give up, and it will happen. it will happen. It happened for us. And I will tell you, we're the least likely guys that you would ever meet that would helm a film or write a film.
Yeah.
You know, we're just two idiots from Chicago. We're not professional writers. We're wannabe actors. So
if you had to pick the hardest part of this entire process for you, from the concept to the delivery to the distribution, what if you had to pick one thing that stands out the most? What was
probably the distribution?
Distribution. Okay.
I would just say money in general. Anything that has to do, anything that doesn't have to do with actually shooting the film.
Yeah.
And this is what I said. We got asked this when we were in North Carolina by that one interviewer. He said, "What's the best and the worst part?" I said, "The best part is when you're shooting. The worst part is everything else."
Everything else,
right?
It's like, you know, when you're shooting, it's the best time of your life.
Yeah.
When it's done,
even if it's hard and long, I mean, even if it's long, hard, terrible day, it's still the best time. And you know, Orson Welles, you know, used to complain that 98% of it was BS, you know, and only 2% was enjoyable filmmaking. And that is 100% the truth. And there are so many scumbags in this fucking business. Pardon my French. That's the toughest thing to navigate.
Trust me, we must have met 98% of them.
Everyone's looking to rip you off, and everyone's looking to get your stuff for free, you know, and make money off of it. And that's the hardest part.
Or they think you're some big movie star because you made one film, and they're looking for you to finance their project. And we're like, dude, you know who made the least amount of money on the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre? Margettis and Carey. That's who we made. We made two things on our movie so far: jack and shit.
Yeah.
We've lost more money, believe me, than we've made.
Yeah, absolutely.
We knew that going into the process, so we knew we were sacrificing, but it was worth it, you know, so far. So we'll see. We're hoping to reap the reward down the road. It's a big picture and a long ball game. So
100%.
That's kind of what I had done with my book. So when I first wrote my book, I was doing like 5 sign-ins a week everywhere, just coffee shops, breweries, wherever I could,
wherever you can get it out.
Yeah, just so I definitely can relate to you guys on from that.
It's a word of mouth thing, man. When you don't have $1 million in marketing behind you, that's all you can do. You know, you have to get people talking about it to each other. You know, more importantly. So that's
you have to hit it every chance you get and keep it relevant. Otherwise, it's going to get lost. And once it's lost, I think it's lost. So I mean, we're lucky that it's a few months down the road, and we're still you know, people are still watching it and still talking about it and things like that. So I'm hoping that it will catch. We don't know what the you know, the viewership is yet. We will probably towards the, you know, middle of next month, maybe. So we'll be pleasantly surprised, and maybe we won't. But either way, whoever watched it, it's only because me and him are bothering the hell out of everybody.
Well, even the good thing is with horror, there's always a sales point. You've got Halloween.
Yeah.
You can do. In it for Valentine's Day somehow. Like, you know, there's always every month has something.
100%.
We're hoping to do more conventions and more screenings. We really like the screenings and the Q&As and stuff because we like meeting people and people that have great questions to ask, people like yourself who are fellow, you know, artists and creators. And we love that because we love talking shop, and, you know, if we can help anybody, because we love paying it forward, and we figure, you know,
I think the other thing too with it is when you're in horror, you know, whatever you want to put it to, people look for films in that genre. You know what I mean? Rarely do people roll up and be like, "I want to watch a rom-com tonight." Like, that sounds like a fun thing, or you know, horror fans. And again, this is the best part. They're directed toward their genre. You know, they know what they want to look for.
And they're the most loyal, best fans on the planet. Really.
And they seem to be easier to please than a lot of other fans.
I don't give two craps. I don't give 2 craps if anybody in Hollywood knows who I am. I care if I go to a horror movie convention, somebody liked the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre. Awesome. That's what I care. Yeah.
Well, guys, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, man. It's been awesome.
Great, and I really appreciate you guys very much. So we're definitely going to keep in touch for sure. If you guys have
good luck with everything.
Movie, what's that?
Good luck with everything.
Good luck.
Thank you. If you guys have not seen the Manson Brothers Zombie Massacre, please check it out. You can get it on Amazon. And where else can you get that?
It's the Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre. You can watch it on Amazon, iTunes, Vudu, Google Play, Redbox, IMDb,
Everything.
VOD everywhere, DVD and Blu-ray. You can buy that on Amazon.
Yeah.
The Manson Brothers Midnight Zombie Massacre.
And check us out on our socials too. The Chris Margolis, Real Mike Carey, Manson Brothers the movie, all that kind of fun stuff. And
MansonBrothers.com.
we're one of the few guys, MansonBrothers.com, that if you send us a DM, we'll write you back. So 100%. So come and check us out.
Awesome. You guys take care, man. We'll be in touch.
All right.
Thanks,
be good.
James.
Later. Thanks a lot,
brother. All right.